everyone, and hi, Peggy. Welcome to the Sporting Global podcast. It's a pleasure having you here with us. How are you?
I am well. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. I see the weather is pretty nice in California right now, though, behind you.
We are experiencing amazing weather. We've been breaking records with our heat. It's been like, mid upper 70s. It's not right. It's definitely global warming, but it's been enjoyable.
Right.
We're actually having quite a bit of heavy, strong winds right now too. So you might see the trees in the background. That's a little unusual for my area, but it is beautiful, but it's wrong. We need winter.
Right. No, I was thinking about that too. I was like, why is it so warm in January, in February? What's up with that?
It's global warming.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, like, we can just state the fact that global warming is a thing.
It is a thing. It is a thing. We're enjoying this weather, but it's wrong, and we all know it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, you just gotta look at the bright side. I mean, like, 2020 was pretty rough. We're in 2021 now. I guess like everything is like, hopefully getting back on the positive side, on some good tracks. But I see, you're working from home, and I mean, like, of course, we had a little bit talk already about like some changes that you guys are thinking about it at the earthquakes, and I think we might have to touch a little bit upon that. But for those of you that are joining us, today it's like our second episode with an HR professional, Peggy from the San Jose Earthquakes. Really appreciating that you're taking the time. And if you like to hear more episodes like this, make sure to like the video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can get key insights from sport professionals and HR professionals like Peggy. So Peggy, I mean, like, I'm kind of just curious about, what was it about HR, and particularly in sports, that made you sort of like want to like explore this career option?
So it's a great question, and I get it frequently, and I have a very simple answer. So honestly, I didn't want to go into high tech. So I had been in high tech previously. I had worked at a semiconductor company, and I had taken time off to raise my family. And when I was ready to get back into the workforce, I was just like, no way do I want to get back into high tech. God bless them, but I was not interested in SRAMs and DRAMs anymore. And so I found a job posting for the San Jose Earthquakes. It was a coordinator in HR position. Yeah. And I thought, well, I played soccer. I coached my kids in soccer. I've played sports my whole life. I can do that. So I applied.
I mean, and here you are.
And here I am, almost 7 years later.
I mean, like, but this is the thing about sports, though, that is so nice. It's sort of like most people have like this relationship to it. As you said, like, okay, yeah, I've been playing soccer. Like, I also coach my kids. You sort of like have that personal link, and this is why I think like the sport industry is so amazing, and what makes it unique. But it's always cool, like, seeing people like transitioning and say like, no, I want to do sports. That sounds fun, and I'm sure it's been a blast, working for the Earthquakes now for many years, and seeing sort of like the path of the club moving forward, and being a big factor of their staff and everything going on to increase what is happening in the organization. So I'm sure that's a blast.
It really is. It's been a lot of fun watching the club evolve and change over the past 7 years, and watching people come in and all of their different diverse backgrounds of how they got to sport, how they got to San Jose Earthquakes. It's always fascinating. There's people who live and breathe soccer, right? And there are people that have no background in sport at all. And you don't have to have, and that's one thing that's nice, is you don't have to have a background in sports. You don't have to have work experience in sports, and you really don't even have to be a super fan. For some positions, yes, but some positions, HR, finance, you don't have to have that kind of background. And so it's kind of nice because you bring in such a diverse workforce that way. You're not all in a silo work experience path.
Right. And as you said too, it's like But at the end of the day, like you still have that, link, personal link to the sport or maybe the team, and like, say like, okay, this is something that I enjoy and that, I think I can contribute value with it, which I'm sure also you saw when you're like, this is something that I can associate myself with, and I know, I'm local, it all makes sense.
It's
But
definitely bonding. It's definitely bonding. There's not a single person who has worked at the Quakes who hasn't become a true Quakes fan,
right,
right? So even if you don't have a sporting background,
yeah,
when you come here, you get the sporting background and then you
right.
become a fan.
Yeah, and,
Yeah,
and like you feel like one of the team, right? Like
right.
you also know, like, of course, like everything happening on the field is, extremely important, but working for that club too, it just gives that association to, being a part of, okay, you're contributing to actually what is happening on the field in a sense, maybe it's big or small, but you're part of their success. I mean, like I'm talking with the club here in my city every week, and they talk about, okay, if they lose a game, the entire office is mad. If they win a game, everyone is super happy. You just
Very true.
follow that
Very
role.
true.
So even
Yes,
for the HR, you're feeling that emotion.
definitely. 100%. Yes.
That's awesome. I think it's very important that people know that, like HR also care about the team.
You have to. You have to.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. So obviously you touched a little bit upon your journey in the sport industry, but if you just sort of like, how did you essentially end up in earthquake, sort of like that, from your starting point of your HR career, and like, okay, you found that position with the earthquakes, like what was your angle in there?
It was persistence. was my was my angle. Um, I think again because not every position has to have a sporting background.
Right.
Going into HR and not having sport work experience
Yeah.
was just fine. And but I knew I wanted this job, and so it was just being persistent with the hiring process. It was a
Right.
little slow. It took a couple of months.
Yeah.
They were hiring some other positions at the same time, and
Right.
so juggling the time. And this is what happens when you work from home. Um,
It's our new
so
podcast guest.
yes, this is Monkey. Um, but that was really my in. I didn't know anybody at the club.
Right. Right.
I just went straight from the job posting and
Yeah.
wanting to be a part of it,
Right.
part of the club. So
That's awesome. And I think, like, as you said, like just seeing that opportunity, grabbing it, and now like being part of that team and the culture for 7 years now. It's an amazing story. And speaking a little bit about culture though, because we just talked about sort of like the flexibility and working from home now, for probably like close to a year. I would guess. I don't even know
yes,
anymore. It's been long.
yes,
So
yeah, 9, 10 months.
right, and obviously, understanding in that sense, we're seeing, okay, yeah, people can actually, provide value doing their tasks and doing everything from home. And we talk a little about like having that flexibility, and how have you guys and the earthquakes were like thinking about like, okay, how do we, become more flexible now once people are more and more getting back into the office?
So I mean, exactly, we have to. I mean, now that
Right.
we've proven, whether we wanted to or not, we've proven that we can work from home successfully.
Yeah,
We can't do everything, right?
for sure.
So if we have games, so last fall we were able to have games without fans, though.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but it does require some work, to be
Right.
on site.
Yeah.
But the majority of the full time positions, we have found that we can work from home, and
Yeah.
so we're still, in the Bay Area and in California, um, really heavily affected by the pandemic right now. Our ICU beds availability, I think it's only at like 6% or something. So we're still on heavy lockdown here.
Right.
We have no idea when we're going to go back. We don't know when the season starts, nothing. But we do know that when we go back, we will not go back 100% in the office.
Right.
We will allow people to continue to work from home on some sort of, flexible basis. I think
Yep.
it'll depend on, the position,
Right.
and if there's a game, if it's game week, or if there's a big event, that type of thing.
Right.
But there's really no reason why somebody from the finance department needs to drive down from San Francisco to San Jose every day of the week anymore, you
Right.
know?
And in a country like the US, right, and in California, like having those distances, I think it's, saves people a lot of money and time, which they can use again to also like, be more efficient, maybe at work,
Time.
these kind of stuff.
It- Time is a really big factor. I mean, it is, it's pretty amazing when you think about, if you're familiar with the Bay Area or not, but
Right.
it's easily 45 minutes to
Yeah.
60 minutes on average for a commute one direction, right?
Yeah.
And so, if you can cut down on that time and be able to work from home, and, just get up and start working right away, and
Right.
not doing that drive time and not being tired,
Yeah.
that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, it's a huge factor, right? Be like just waking up in bed, eating a nice breakfast, and just starting your day from home. It could be a game changer. And I think, also with the new generation coming in, having that flexibility and for us being a little bit more, I guess, like we have different kind of ways of working. Like we always talk with like my team, like we always say, like, it doesn't matter like what hours you work as long as you get it done. Like I prefer, like, waking up a little bit later and working, late, and then my teammate is, he's morning person, like all this stuff, right? And I mean, like, at the end of the day, if we make it work, we communicate all this stuff, like you can make
Yep.
things work. You got to have that flexibility and understanding that, of course, people are also different, but as you said, like different kind of roles, different kind of, perspectives of how flexible you can be. But having that opportunity, I think, is very important for sports organizations moving forward. And again, being able to like make sure that the staff and everyone involved can perform at their best ability.
Yes, and you mentioned the flexibility, and that goes for folks with families, and it's not,
Right.
just the moms, it's the dads as
Right.
well,
100%.
that have children, and you run into a global pandemic and they have to do school from home. How can you go to work, but you need to have childcare, right?
Right.
But everybody's too scared to have childcare, so you have to be the childcare. So you have
Yeah.
to, finding that we're able to be flexible, I mean, it just benefits the entire workforce and makes
Right.
it so you can have a more diverse workforce as well.
Yeah.
And, not just old school traditional um, occupants, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's great. I think it produces some managerial challenges that
Yep.
people have to step up into their management roles maybe a little bit more, because there's a
True.
lot of people that are used to, they see you every day, and so I can see that you're working,
Yeah.
right? And then if I don't see you, are you working? And that's
Right.
really a management issue of
Right.
making sure that you trust your staff, and you
Right.
have,
Trust. Huge.
metrics in place to track,
Yeah.
that type of thing. But sometimes I have heard colleagues say, well, we're not sure if they're actually working or not, and it's like, well, that's on you to figure
Right.
out.
Right. Right. I mean, like, it's hard, in a sense that, it's that nice balance between, trust and, as you said, having those metrics of like, okay, how do you track the results, or like the task, or what that might be. And of course, as you said, that's the manager's role then to like find, okay, how do we measure the results and their performance, right? And then again, trusting that they're doing their job. At the end of the day, that's part of the game. But I think we have to go into, like, the stuff that we're really going to talk about, more of like the tips, the challenges, all the fun stuff that all these young professionals and all these people that are maybe looking to get a career in sports. And there's a lot of people, including myself, that have been applying for a lot of jobs, and just, why didn't I hear anything back, or a lot of these reasons, right? And I think, like, one of the good questions to start with is like, what are some of the top, 3, 4 things that you are looking for when receiving a job application? What are some of the things that you're like, this is important?
Typos.
Right.
Your resume should be correct.
Yeah.
No typos, no
100%.
grammatical errors. Your cover letter, should be personal to whomever you're sending it to. Make sure that somebody else's name or somebody else's company is not on your pass merge, um,
Right.
you know, cover letter.
Yeah.
So that's actually a really big thing. There are certain roles that are actually quite detail oriented.
Right.
Account service, and there's a lot of email and a lot of communication that happens, and so being grammatical is important, and
Yep.
so that would be number one.
Right.
um, for me, then, kind of the next thing is really role dependent,
Right.
but
Sure.
how long has it been since you graduated?
Yep.
What work experience you have since you've graduated?
Right.
How long have you been in that work experience? So loyalty and tenure is important.
Yep.
If you're, in a position for a small amount of time and it's not an internship, and
Yep.
you just keep jumping and jumping and
Right.
jumping, that's not the type of person that we're looking for.
Right. Kind of like looking at to those, and I mean, like I just want to touch upon also like the cover letter, because this was something that they came up like on the previous talk too, right? The importance of like spending that extra time of like fine tuning the resume and the cover letter, and making sure those details, as you say, is relevant, and that you avoid those stupid mistakes. And we get it, like it's easy to apply for a lot of jobs, and there's probably a lot of stuff that you're interested in, but make the dedication to take the time to do things right and make sure that it is personal, because as you say, like this is one of the first things that you guys are looking at,
Yes.
and that will
Yes.
dictate also a lot on how you actually evaluate, I would assume, the candidates, right? And like
Right. Right. Exactly. And it should be personal. I mean, not, I don't want anybody stalking me online and saying something personal about me, but
right,
something
right,
personal about, the sport or the club.
right,
Just making sure it's not just a cookie cutter, letter.
yeah,
Um, I think, a lot of times students get into how much, they love soccer. And I think that's something at this point, we understand that,
right,
and we want you to, but you're not going to sell me on the fact that you love soccer,
right,
right? Or a
yeah,
particular sport.
sure,
Get more into the role and what you're looking for and your end goals, and you studied something in school and it piqued your interest, and that type of thing.
right. How to make essentially your experience tying into the role that you're applying for, and
Right.
the organization that you're applying for.
Or if there's something more personal about what piqued your interest, what got you
Right,
into the Sounds of Earthquakes. If it
yeah,
was, one of your first, sporting events that you went to with your family,
right.
then but not just this generic, I love soccer.
Yeah, because I mean, like a lot of people love soccer, so how do you
We hope
stand out, right?
everybody does.
Yeah, so how do you stand out? And we're going to touch upon that a little bit in at the end of the podcast too. But and one of the questions that we got from someone as well, like they were kind of like curious about the first podcast, and they said like, well, to what extent should someone apply for a job for which they do not meet all the qualifications? And I think there's a lot of people that are sort of like in that boat. We're like, should I apply? Is this at what level should you?
And I think that's a great question, and I've given it a percentage, but I'm not locked in on this. I've never
Right.
really thought about, okay, I'm looking for 75%, but I think that's about where you should be.
Yep.
I think if you have all of the qualifications, you may very well actually be overqualified
Right.
for a position, right? I mean,
Right.
you want it to be a stretch, right? It
Sure.
should be
Sure.
a jump and an evolutionary step, right,
Yep.
in your career path. So you want there to be room for you to be growing and learning. So I'd say, a good 75%, you should
Yep.
have the qualifications required.
And I think it's very important what you're talking about there too. Is like, okay, if you meet all the requirements, maybe you are overqualified, as you said, and as you know, like you will look at that and say, hey, I mean, like you're a great candidate, but we need someone that that needs to stretch, and keep like elevating their abilities and learning something, right, and bringing something new to that table. So I think, like, as you said, the 75% range is, you can cover the basics, and as you said, maybe there are some flexibility, 60, 80, whatever that might be. I guess it's also like probably a little bit depending on the role, I guess, of like what kind of position we're talking about.
Exactly. And I'm not, sure about other clubs and other front offices, sure. Sport organizations, but for ours, we run pretty lean on our labor, right? And so our organization is actually relatively flat. So if you come in and you're already, essentially knowledgeable at the position, right, and you don't have a lot to grow into it, you may become, more bored quicker, right? And then I'm not sure that we're going to have that growth for you that quick. I mean, there's kind of, time that it takes to grow into something, and for people to, see what your skills are, and maybe we can create something and that sort of thing. But if you come in and you're overqualified, you're going to be bored in 6 months. I'm looking for something else already.
Right. No, that's a really valid point. And I mean, like, it will be interesting in the next few episodes as well. I'm going to bring this question up, because it was something that popped up from the last one. And I was like, okay, let me keep, getting some new questions in here that we can, like, and start to compare a little bit too, because it will be very interesting as we talked about before the podcast too, of like, how do different HR managers think, like what is their perspective? And as you said, you can learn some stuff from it too, and gain some inspiration or what that might be, insights, and comparing, so I think that is
I think there are different philosophies on that as well about do you want to grow into a position or be qualified right away when you get into it? Like if you're looking for a promotion, right? Is that person, is it going to be a stretch position and they're going to grow into it? Maybe they don't have everything as you promote somebody from manager to director, but you can see their potential and they're going to get there. Or do you wait until they have all of those skills that you're looking for and then you promote? We're a little bit more on the learning side.
I mean, I like, there always have to be like some growth, right, and learning, and then like that's also about like sort of like the philosophy of like coaching, like from your managers, from your directors, like educating the new employers to like, performing at the highest possible level. So obviously you've been talking like a little bit about like what is important for you guys at Earthquakes, but like what are some of the, key elements that you guys are looking for at that San Jose Earthquakes when you're recruiting? Like, is it values? Is it skills? Is it like, what kind of like things are like, okay, this is Earthquakes like core elements when we are recruiting?
Attitude and effort. Those are the main things. So, if you have skills, great. And then if we can teach you the skills that you need, but it's really all about attitude and effort. As I said earlier, we run pretty lean, and so we work really hard. There's a lot of collaboration. It's a team sport on the pitch, and it's a team sport in the office. So you will not be successful if you have the mentality of that's not my job. Right. And so for us, it's really, if you have the attitude, you come in, you're going to be here, on time or early. And you're going to work hard. You're going to try, you're going to reach out, you're going to ask questions, you're going to, raise your hand for certain tasks. And you're really putting in that effort. You're asking questions. If you're not, in the top 5 on the sales board, you're going to your peers, you're going to your higher ups, and you're asking questions. Hey, can you help me? What's going on? If you just sit there and, just get upset that you're not number 1, but you're not trying, right? it's like when you're in school, when you're in college, you talk to your professors, you
Right.
talk to the aides, right? You get in study groups. If you make those efforts, and we are a small organization, so we can see who's doing that and who's not.
So how do you try to like look at these sort of things though, like when you're essentially evaluating the candidates? Because I mean, like,
You interview for that.
right, right. I mean, like, this is sort of like where things are getting very narrowed down, right? And you're just like, how do you pick out those? Like, how do you spot it?
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
Um, um, there's no simple formula.
Right.
It's hard, but it's situational, interview questions,
Sure.
and you've got this type of situation and you have a fan that's, like this. So you've got, this type of thing. It's asking those types of questions.
Right.
Um, you know, we we always ask, especially our young candidates for more entry level positions,
Sure.
about their experience with failure
Mm,
and their reaction to failure,
right.
and rejection. So that's especially important when you're in the sales role,
Yeah.
right? And so you're going to experience that on a daily basis. Um,
Right.
on the phones, right? And
Sure.
that counts, and it can get old. And if your team isn't doing well,
Right.
it might be harder to sell,
Right.
right? They're not doing well. And so you're going to, receive that constant rejection.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of questions about that. So it's spending time. It's not just one, interview for 30
Yeah.
minutes.
Yeah.
Um,
Sure.
you know, um, Oftentimes we have, many people. We have a Quakes University program that's a training program, and that's a panel interview with, four of us, and we spend quite a bit of time. So it's hard. I have no specific formula on it. Um,
I
but
mean, you
those
guys
are
have
really
your
the
way. It's a way of
what?
doing. You guys have your way. Of doing it. And as you said, like, you already talked about, like, okay, we have this Quake University. We have like the panel. We have, we're trying to dig deep. And you already touched upon, some of the questions that I think is very important. And I mean, like, as a student now and young professional listening, like, think about these sort of things, like, how do you cope with failure? How do you cope with rejections? And because in many cases, and I mean, like, we already talked about it now, like, sales is going to be like a very important role moving forward as well in the position we are. Like, people need to bring in the green, the dough, all this
The
stuff.
first step. It's a first stepping stone for a lot of people in their careers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So think about that. Like, you have some thoughts here from, like, the HR at Earthquakes. Knowing what they're asking. So if you're listening, make sure to save this question and work on it and try to, like, how do I really cope with it? And if you don't know, like, how do you learn from that? Like, what can you do in order to actually put yourself in that position? And I mean, like, we have to talk a little about, requirements from organizations in California, because California has also been sort of like a very, staple of, like, especially in terms of requirements for interns. There's new regulations coming in. You have now a lot of remote internships happening. So what type of, requirements do you guys have to keep in mind, being in California when recruiting interns?
So in general, we steer away from the term intern.
Right.
And that's part of, this Quakes University program that I created is a training program. We don't call it an intern program.
Sure.
Um, Interns typically conjure up, the notion of being unpaid. And that's very difficult to get away with in the state of California.
Yep. Yep.
There are a lot of restrictions and qualifications for an intern,
Sure.
and they, have certain hours, and it has to be academic based. And getting back to our organization being pretty small,
Yep.
and we run a pretty tight ship, that we don't have that flexibility to, have more of an academic based internship program,
Sure.
and
Sure.
coordinate with the university and that sort of thing. So we really don't have interns. I hire part-time employees, Sometimes they only work 4 weeks. Sometimes they work 8 weeks, and that's typically more during the summer.
Yep.
We've partnered with Stanford University, and we always, hire a couple of student athletes, and they come work for us, but they can really only work for about a month.
Sure.
And that's fine, but we just hire them on as a part-time employee.
Yep.
And then they work in whatever department we can find.
Right. And how, I mean, like talking a little bit about that though, where you talk a little bit about like, okay, how long are you at organizations, previously, like looking at to someone's resume, like how then as a student athlete or that person that get like, okay, this is like a 1 month or like 8 week position, like how do you showcase that so they're like, oh, you were only there for a month, you were only there for 8 weeks, how do you, like, what should they keep in mind?
That part is, yeah, and on that part it's fine, and I understand, kind of going back to my previous comment where exactly. I don't like people who jump around.
Yeah.
But if it is a part-time intern, training program, then that's fine, because you're gathering experience. They're typically 1 to 3 months, and maybe over the summer or a particular season. It's a little bit more when you've been a full-time employee somewhere, for 6 months, one year, a year and a half, and then you just keep jumping and jumping.
Right.
Then that's not showing longevity and loyalty. But on the part-time basis,
all right.
I think that's different.
No, but I think it's like, maybe like, would you sort of like suggest them, like say they have like, this sort of like part-time solution that they already know is going to be like for 2 months, 3 months, or whatever it might be, that you just put like a note, like it was like a 3-month contract or what might be,
that's
to help you guys out, like essentially, because as like they are evaluating, or you guys are evaluating them based on what's on paper, right? In to begin with. So how do you, like, I'm just thinking, as if I was in this position, how do I showcase that? Okay, but this was actually just, I can do more, I can do, this was the 3 months that I could have,
Yeah. And a lot of them will, and you can, it doesn't have to be a specific way. It can just be noted as, season position, part-time position, just as summer work, that sort of thing. But yes, when you're a student, you want to be getting as much of that kind of experience as you can. So it's okay to have frequent,
So you're thinking more in terms of like the ones that are being like, full-time positions over time, maybe like looking for a manager or like director job or something like that. Right.
Exactly.
All right, that makes sense. I just think it's like important to like just make things clear here for the ones that are listening, so they're like, where do I fit into this bowl, and how do I make sure that I like, can angle it? Because I mean, like, if we don't ask these questions, how do you know, right?
You have to ask questions. There are no bad questions.
Right. And this is also a very key thing. So when you're in an interview, like, ask questions, or like reach out to people about the positions, and like ask more about the role. We're actually at our final question of the day already. Who knew? It's been fun so far, and I think we've been touching a little bit about like tips. We've been diving a little bit into like some of the key stuff you guys are looking for, how the earthquakes are working with like recruiting new people. But for any new sport professional looking for a job, like, what tips do you have? Like, how do you separate yourself from the crowd? And I mean, like, maybe you have like a great story from like someone that you remember that applied, or you like, oh, that was someone that were really able to separate themselves in what you were looking for. That, I think it would be great having those kind of story for them to know.
Making yourself as personally related to the club as you can. So of course, if you've got the story about you were at the Cali Classico at Buckshaw, and you remember a particular game, and then you watch the fireworks afterwards and with your family, that type of thing stands out. I mentioned earlier, we've got this Quakes University training program, and it's 8-month-long program.
Nice.
The first 4 months, it's part-time,
Oh,
but the first 4 months, candidates are working in the inside sales program. And then the
nice.
second 4 months or the second semester, you're working in another department that is mutually agreed upon between you and the manager. So hopefully this is something in your area of interest. And we've had great success with this program. It's let's see, it's a little over 2 years old now.
Nice.
We've had a couple of people that came through the program and they were stars. We could tell that they had the skills, they had the right attitude and effort. They fit in really well with our culture, but we didn't have a full-time role for them.
Right.
Um, but they were able to stay on in a part-time role,
Nice.
and eventually a full-time role became available.
Right.
We've got one guy who works in our marketing department and does a lot of film and camera work.
Yep.
And he stayed on with us for about another extra 6 months until the next budget season. And then we were able to budget in a full-time role for him.
That's awesome.
And it was really just him being persistent
Right.
and showing that attitude and that effort, right? And willing to hang out and try. But he also had this long family past with the Quakes,
Right.
and first generation college student, and this whole thing. And
Right.
so it was really special.
The little things matters, which is
They
essentially
do.
what you're saying, in
They
a
do.
sense. And I think
In a
it's,
sense. Most sports organizations, that's what I like,
yeah,
as opposed to like high tech, right?
right,
They're small organizations and everybody knows everybody and you know your stories.
right. No, it's very true, and I think it's a really great way to end the podcast, Peggy. I think it's been really insightful. I really appreciate you being so open, sharing a lot of like how you guys are thinking, like what are some of the challenges you guys are facing, what you're looking for. And I think for those that have been listening, that they've been learning a lot. I mean, like I definitely have been learning a lot too, and it's been great, kind of like getting that insights. And I hope for those that are listening, make sure to check out maybe the Quakes program, and see what's that all about. It might be a good fit.
Please do.
And I mean, like for those of you that haven't already, make sure to like the video, follow, and support Sporting Global so you can get more insights from sport professionals like Peggy every week, right on your YouTube, Spotify, wherever you want to listen into, pretty much everywhere, more or less, and then don't forget to sign up at sportingglobal.com, and we'll help you. It's a platform for you to like connect with like-minded people, find relevant opportunities, and learn, from people in the industry, guiding you on your path, because it's not easy finding your path, and this is why we do what we do, to help you. And like I said, Peggy, I really appreciate you sharing your time, and I mean, like, I gotta finish up with some Norwegian, so you learn like some Norwegian. I don't know if you're ready for it, but it's essentially see you later in Norwegian, and that's is vi snakkes. So that's how we finish up with.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This was a lot of fun.
Absolutely, Peggy. Thank you so much. And yeah, we'll vi snakkes.